All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, present, myself, Chair Trustee Eugene Dugan.
Trustee Bruce Giles.
Trustee Walt Berry.
Barbara Boyd, first grade.
William Johnston, staff.
Gregory Williams, staff.
And can I mention that Harvey Lewis is joining us through Zoom, and I think to allow him to participate and vote on items, the board needs to approve his attendance through Zoom. So if we could have the board, a motion to do that. Is that right, Bob?
Yes. So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve Harvey Lewis through Zoom for a vote. There's a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right. That's because the state lifted that statute.
Right.
Okay.
But still requires a quorum in person, and, if someone wants to attend through Zoom or
Right.
telecommunication, they can with the board's
With
approval.
the board's approval. Perfect. All right, so we have Harvey Lewis.
I'm actually recommending that you maintain the Zoom portal for the, foreseeable future, because it allows more of our members and the public to participate without having to face the issue of social distancing in the room, particularly because we don't know what people's vaccination status is and the recent surge in cases. You would not be the only one doing that. I think most have decided that the easiest way to hire people participate in the convention program is the way
Yeah.
participate in
I can hear you.
I'm thinking it's just me.
All right, thank you, Bob. So, all right, for the record, also present is Trustee Steve Arvell. All right. We have a agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Yeah, second.
All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. We have the minutes from the May meeting. There was no quorum in June. Sorry about that. Is there a motion to waive I think we were all present in May. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the minutes?
I'm going to waive the reading of the minutes.
All right, the motion, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Board Attorney, Mr. Klausner, I think you're up.
Yes, sir. I have been working with Willis
Bob, could-
Towers Watson on two alternative investment arrangements, one with Freddie and one with GI Advisors. And Denver particularly cooperative agreeing to matters which I think are necessary for protection in these agreements. I have had these investments for organizations Delaware under Delaware law.
Hey, Bob, could you turn up your volume just a little bit? We're having a hard time hearing you in the room.
Okay.
Oh, it says do not adjust. I ain't touching it.
Hard to believe nobody ever complains about that. Is that better?
I just want to go on record, Trustee Marvell did not complain about hearing less of Bob.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think
Yes,
so.
sir.
Okay. I was complaining about Marvell, but now, so, they've been uncooperative with the things that I think are necessary within the context of Delaware limited partnerships. I worked with Josh Trinidad from WTW last Friday, again on Monday. I sent them what I thought, and I copied William on it, that, take one last stab at this. I don't know whether these are great investments or not great investments. I don't judge that. That's what a consultant can do. But I do know that absent what I sent them that needs to be included in the contract, I can't recommend it to you as having adequate remedies if the thing goes south. And I have had these things go south before, and we've had to engage in litigation. There are plenty of state laws that protect us. Quite frankly, any asset manager that takes money from Gainesville on a discretionary management under 518.112 Florida statutes consents to the jurisdiction of the Florida courts in Alachua County and under a Florida law. Now, they want us to waive protections like that, and I say we cannot waive what the legislature says shall. So, my recommendation, they don't agree, and I don't have an answer back from them, despite my recent correspondence. If at next month's meeting, they have not favorably answered the additional matters which I sent, I'm going to tell you that you certainly have the authority to go ahead, but it won't have people's reputation as adequately protecting the system. So that's what we stand on that. The only other matter is, I know you are a class member, you're actually a class member of several securities litigation cases. I wrote about this one where you sought to lead a larger responsibility Supreme Court investor substituted and that and several other cases in which you are a passive class member continue, nothing substantive for the
Recording in progress.
I see my desktop and now you're just recording.
Sorry about that.
Those words are now lost in posterity.
It's double recorded, no worries.
Otherwise, things are quiet, things are quiet, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Which investment were we talking about?
Yeah, that was a question.
So this was the Pretium and the GTI Partners investments. They were the sort of niche real estate type investments. And, you know, we had been looking at them for the past, few months, and Bob's been working on this. So, I think Willis Towers Watson is aware that there were some issues. So we'll speak to them before the next meeting and we'll see what the firms come back with and whether they agree to what Bob recommends or not. And then, we'll discuss it with Willis Towers Watson. And like Bob said, it really is up to the board as to whether you want to engage with them, even if they're not willing to accept some of the state mandated language, I guess. Although I'm not really sure how they can get around it. But if it turns out the board doesn't feel like they want to engage them because of this, then we can have Willis Towers Watson look at some additional managers. And there's a larger discussion that I'd like to have with the board about the appropriateness of the alternative fixed income allocations in general. I think that Willis Towers Watson brought these managers to us with the idea that they would provide equity-like returns with lower volatility, and they would provide low correlation to the equity markets. And I don't really think it's worked out that way. And so I'd like the board to have a discussion at some point going forward about whether we want to continue with this strategy in general, or whether we would rather move that money back into equities and have something closer to an 85 or 90% equity allocation with some fixed income and real estate. I'm going to have Willis Towers Watson put together some monthly return and volatility numbers for those managers over the past 2 or 3 years. We've had some of these managers for a couple of years now, and I think the board realizes you saw a couple of these managers do really poorly in the market corrections last year. And we went through this with hedge funds, where we were told that hedge funds in the 2000s were going to perform a certain way, and they never did. Anyway, we'll bring that up at the next meeting.
Okay, so we'll have an agenda item
Right.
just for the discussion of the
Right.
alternative investments, and then William Towers Watson will present what they've done over the last couple of years, correct?
They will, yes.
Steve, did you have something?
Ahead of the meeting, so that certainly at least I can contribute some questions to the board.
Say that again one more time, Bob?
I said I'd like us to be able to get those questions ahead of time.
Okay.
Because I'd like to be able to pose some questions to Willis ahead of the meeting, for your benefit, ahead of the meeting.
Sounds good.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Klausner?
Bob, I just,
I just, right now we're 80-20 in theory, equity, fixed income, right?
no, not quite. We're more like 70,
No, I meant the investment policy.
the policy
I'm talking about
is.
the policy, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But we have wide target ranges, so we're not at that target, but we're within our ranges for allocations.
Okay, I just was reminding myself of our risk tolerance.
And Bob, if you wanted, I didn't know if you wanted to comment, I included some language on the agenda this time that referenced, the public meeting requirements that I think you and I discussed briefly, because a citizen had, at a previous meeting, made a statement that wasn't really true, that, certain things were required for public meetings, and so the city attorney provided this language to me, this response, and I think you had reviewed it and agreed with it. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is nothing in the sunshine law about allowing the public physically into your meeting. They have to have access. The access has to be free. And this format that I'm attending on, the Zoom platform or any other comparable electronic formats, actually allow greater public participation. There is not even a physical forum requirement in the Sunshine Law. The only thing even resembling jurisprudence is the Attorney General issued an opinion that said, well, there is no requirement in the Sunshine Law or in any of the laws that govern our land that require a physical forum. It was recommended that they have a physical forum. I'm okay with that, if you're okay with that.
No, far right.
That's really a voluntary act. Remember, you are state regulated, locally regulated, and there is no requirement in state law, but nor are you required to report anything.
I think you're banishing that from the broadcast from the
Sounds like it's right from here, doesn't it?
That reporting does have to be maintained.
I don't have that, so I can hear.
Work this with
Keep my good ear over there.
Divisional Archives requirements for saving stuff. And I don't know what the length of time is for a third-party electronic reporting.
Do you have a speaker on this?
The city attorney's resignation is absolutely correct. And you can actually find the same information on the website for the Attorney General of Florida in the Florida Government Sunshine Handbook, which is a 150-page book that is electronically on the Attorney General's website, which answers questions about, what's the forum, and you have to report stuff, and what how long you have to keep records. All of that is available at the Florida Attorney General's website.
So was this in June?
Yes, it was in June. There was a
Former
citizen.
mayor candidate?
No.
No, it was another citizen who had stated that the backup documents for the meeting weren't made available ahead of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
And previously, the city practice had been for this board was that we would put the agenda on the notice of meetings, but that we didn't include attachments and we didn't provide recordings, but we.
They could get them if they showed up, right?
Or they could request them
Request them.
as public records.
So should we post that they can go by HR and use one of the computers in the lobby and
Well,
zoom in or something, or?
We've been asked by the
Free
city
access.
manager and finance director to go ahead and make the attachments to the agendas now. So we're making that available now and also recording the meetings.
Perfect. All right. Bob, are you staying in with us? Do we need him for the
Yeah, I'm
ballots?
going to sit again. I do have to depart at 10:45, but Joe told me he's going to call back.
Perfect. All right.
just go eat their coffee.
All right, who we got? We're gonna get our revised fiscal year 19 actuarial valuation, correct?
Correct, and this is something that the board had already approved the development of based on terms that we reached with the Division of Retirement. So the board approved the changes that were made in the revision, but the division also wants the board to approve the actual revised valuation. And the board previously approved the fiscal year 16 through 18 revised vals, and so this is the final one that needs to be approved.
Is anybody gonna go through it, or, I mean, I looked through it last night, are we?
I mean, I think the board's seen it a few times.
Okay.
And it just, Joe, if you want to explain the change, it was just we revised the payroll growth rate assumption down per the terms we had with the Division of Retirement.
And where we ended up with that was back, we're doing the, over a couple of years, right? 2 point something to 2, and where do we end up, Ian?
Hello, board. Glad to be here with you, but as Bob alluded to, I had a little surgery, so I'm in a sling here and I'm hiding. But the changes for this particular report are twofold. One is we agreed to revise the report to use a payroll growth assumption of 0% for this year, which is basically a way of saying that the unfunded accrued liability payment will be calculated on a level dollar basis as opposed to an increasing payment. And the other thing that we reflected is we went ahead and, because you received the proceeds of the pension obligation bond in the fiscal 2020, we counted it as a receivable in the October 1, 2019 revised valuations. And those are the two changes. And you'll see that the contribution rate is significantly lower for fiscal 2021 as a result.
Okay. What do we, so where are we gonna end up with our payroll growth rate in the future?
We're going to use the 10-year average per the state's requirement, and Joe can speak to that.
So it's just that.
That's right. We're going to follow the 10-year average, but I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit, but you'll see when I present the 2020 valuation that payroll growth assumption, at least for this valuation, becomes irrelevant because the fund is actually over 100% funded as of October 1, 2020, and the contribution requirements are not going to have an unfunded liability payment. It's going to be limited under Florida law to the normal costs plus the administrative expenses. So that's good news for this year. And it becomes irrelevant. We went ahead and in our calculations used the 10-year average, which switched back to a very modest 0.16 positive number. But it has no material impact on the contribution requirement because you have to fund the pension plan when you're 100% funded in accordance with Florida statute, which basically says you can't take a credit for being overfunded. You have to contribute normal costs and the expenses for the year. So we went to the 10-year average. I think we continue to use the 10-year average unless the board decides they want to do something differently. But because the large infusion of cash that came in at the end of fiscal 2020 as a result of the pension obligation bond, this plan is in a really good status if you're over 100% as of October 2020.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about 2019 revised?
A little bit like leaving your IRS rebate with IRS, so the next year's tax liability will be diminished.
All right, so is there a motion to approve the 2019 revised Consolidated Pension Plan Actuarial Valuation Report?
Eugene?
Yes, sir.
Ginger wanted to ask a question, our city auditor.
Okay.
Ginger?
Thank you, Steve.
you.
Oh, I'm in your teams and you thinking you're up in your office.
Thank you. This could be a question for William or Purvis Gray or Foster and Foster. Just asking if you could comment on the 7.9% assumed rate of return. We looked into that last year when we did our pension obligation bond refinancing. So I know our rates of return have been pretty low in the last couple of years, but you probably expect them to go up in future years. So could you comment on the city continuing to use the 7.9% at some point?
I can make a comment, and then Joe, I don't know if you want to add to it. You know, the 7.9% is a slightly higher assumed rate of return than a lot of public pension plans in the state of Florida use, but we have a more aggressive investment allocation in this plan than most other plans in the state. And over the past 30 years, we've annualized it close to 10%. And so, you know, my point of view from an investment perspective is that that's a justifiable rate. The State Division of Retirement doesn't necessarily agree with us, and you know, they make comments when we submit our vows from time to time that they think we should lower the rate, but they have not, as of yet, tried to force us to do so. Joe, I don't know if you have any comments.
No, I think that's very well said, William. The 7.9%, while on the face of it may look to some that it's higher, your equity allocation is higher than most. And with a higher equity allocation, that brings a higher expected rate of return. That being said, we were, Foster was attempting to do an experience study for the October 1, 2020 evaluation. Due to some delays and such, we put that off to handle later this summer. And so we're going to take a look not only at the investment return assumption, but all the assumptions that we use in evaluation, all the demographic assumptions holistically. This board has a history of looking at assumptions once every 5 years, and we're due for a new study. As the actuary for the board, my recommendation is always to look at those assumptions holistically all at one time, and every 5 years is within best practices. So for the October 2021 valuation, we will have some assumption changes coming out of the pipe, whether that will include the investment rate of return assumption or not. It'll depend on the analysis we put together. I would be shocked if 7.9 went north. It'll likely either stay the same or come down a little bit, but we're going to look at the whole thing later this summer and make a recommendation to this board before we complete the next evaluation.
Does that answer your questions, Ginger?
Yes, thank you.
All right, is there any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the 2019 actuarial revised valuation?
So moved.
All right, second.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. So we already started talking about 2020 a little there, right? That's what's up next?
Yep, Joe's got a presentation to go through.
Okay, perfect. Joe, we're all yours.
You want me to share my screen, William, or are you gonna?
We've actually got it up on our screen.
Okay, perfect. So now I will go through the October 1, 2020 evaluation, which sets the required contributions for fiscal 2020. So fiscal 2020 is the period of time that starts October 1st, 2021 and ends September 30th, 2022. The city of Gainesville historically has always contributed on a percent of payroll basis, and the results within this valuation or this presentation will reflect that. However, the city and the finance director have what I think is a really good job of looking at this And at least for the police and fire plan and some for the general, they're going to accelerate those contributions at the beginning of the fiscal year, which has the result of saving some interest on at 7.9%. What you see in this report will all be on a percent of payroll basis, but we will be getting back to the board and the city on what that contribution requirement will look like as a single dollar amount made at the beginning of the fiscal year. I'm going to go through, as we have on the screen the content, I'll go through the evaluation, some of the inputs that go into the evaluation, and then we'll have just one item for discussion at the end. So if you go one more slide forward, William. Just to remind the board members, the purpose of the actual evaluation is a snapshot as of October 1, this in 2020, beginning of the fiscal year. We collect information from the city about all the members, all the public safety officers that are in the plan. We put up our model with all the plan provisions, we make budget assumptions about when people are going to retire, how long they're going to draw payments from the plan. And then we ultimately, at the end of the day, we're projecting out the expected benefit payments for the next 100 years into the future. So that way we can tell the city what the required contribution is for the upcoming fiscal year. So at the end of the day, that's it. That's all we're doing is coming up with the contribution that's required to maintain this plan on an actuarially sound basis within board statutes. We're going to put forward another slide. This valuation, as I said, develops the minimum requirements for fiscal 2022. There are a couple items that we updated for this year. Actually, I mentioned the payroll growth assumption going from a flat dollar 0% to 0.16%. That had no impact on the contribution requirements. Under Florida statute, chapter 2015-157, we're required to use the same mortality tables that are used in one of the two most recent evaluations of the Florida retirement system. They updated their mortality tables recently, and so we're required to make that update. Those tables are specific to the special risk employees within FRS, which is basically public safety, and we're allowed to make adjustments based on the city of Gainesville's and demographics. And normally I don't like mandated assumption. I don't like when the state or anyone tells your actuary what you have to use. That being said, this particular assumption I don't mind, and there's a good reason for it. In January of 2019, the Society of Actuaries published the 2010 tables, which were the first tables ever in the history of the world, or at least in the U.S., published specific public retirement plans. So the Society of Actuaries, and the reason it's called Pub 2010 is the experience centers around 2010. It's like a 5-6 year period where 2010 is the midpoint. But they collected about 46 million life years of exposure, 580,000 deaths from 35 different public pension systems covering 78 plans. And they collected enough data to develop tables that were specific not just to public sector employees, but teachers, public safety members, as well as general employees. And they published tables based on income. They found that income was a big driver of how long people lived.
No kidding.
Obviously, the more income at your disposal, that would help you with things such as healthcare costs and things like that. So, while I don't like mandated assumptions, the ones we're using for your plan today, which are the same as what's used for FRS, I actually really do like, and I think it has some significant weight. Moving forward to the census data, this is one of the inputs we get information from the city about the membership. When we project out these numbers, you'll see that as of October 1, 2020, there were 243 active police officers, 160 actively employed firefighters. There were 39 members in the draw retirees, beneficiaries, and disabled members who are currently drawing a pension from the system.
Who's deferred?
Those are people who have left and will receive a benefit in the future when they reach a certain age.
Early
but-
retirement.
Yeah, they, right.
Gotcha.
Or they might be limited participants, so they might be receiving a benefit from the general pension and will later receive a small benefit from police or fire.
Okay.
All right, we do have some people that cross over, maybe they don't, they're in the probationary period and aren't certified as police and fire, but then go to work as general or might go into communications or something like that. So we do have some crossover folks that are included in the 39 deferred numbers.
Well, that's why, yeah, but they didn't break down the
The
fire.
majority of those are people that left employment with the city for the vested benefit that they can draw when they get home retirement age.
10.
I can get you the data.
Yeah, I know how
So, will you move on to the next slide?
Will Rule of 70 also be included in Rob's?
If they go into drop, they're included there.
All right, we're back on page. Sorry.
Go back if you want.
What do you say? You ready to move forward?
Oh,
Yeah,
we're ready.
We're fine.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Sometimes Zoom makes it a little difficult, but, so this slide basically looks at those active firefighters and police officers from the fire slide, and looks at the average compensation, which is up quite a bit, from the prior year. You know, as you know, your plans are collectively bargained and agreements were reached, and the firefighters and police officers have defined increases, and so you'll see that the average pay was up a little bit more for police and fire, but when you look year over year, but just looking at, as of October 1, 2020, the average salary for firefighters is $55,000, just shy of $62,000 for your police officers. And you can see that, you know, it has come down and been, you know, very level the past 2-3 years, but now that the contract was signed, we're starting to see the increases come back in the averages here.
Question?
Joe, we've got a question here.
More of a statement, because I saw the head shaking over there. What's also what's reflected in that different though, is GFR has a much better retention
Right,
of
that's
people.
what I
So their
figured,
people have, I just want folks to understand
Well, that's what I told my
there's
guys.
something more than just base pay.
I understand that.
Okay.
That's what I figured right out of the gate.
All right, I know you did, I just,
No, I told
Even
my
though I
guys.
don't like our retention
Of course,
rate.
I sent this to the union.
what do you
but
mean? It's
better than GPD though.
As I
It's one of the
explained,
best in the city. Okay, never mind.
Joe, could you clarify also that these salaries reflect the pensionable pay in the data, so it may not include all overtime and non-pensionable pay like that?
Yeah, that's right. We're limited to 300 hours of overtime pay, as well as there's limitations that the state put in place. And it was the collective bargaining agreements that I think were signed in 2013 and 2014 for fire and police respectively, where accrued payouts were limited to the amounts that were in effect when those contracts were signed. So this is not total pay, this is measurable pay. And I think it was Mr. Marvell that pointed out, these numbers also reflect turnover. So when somebody retires or leaves the city, and you hire a new police officer or firefighter, from a year-over-year standpoint, you know, the salary that rolled off and the salary that came on are reflected in these averages. So these are not just continuing police officers or firefighters, this is the whole group. And historically, for this plan, firefighters have had a much lower turnover rate. And so that kind of gets reflected in these numbers, I think, as Mr. Marvell had pointed out.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so that's active members, looking at the folks that are receiving a pension from the plan. This includes there's a drop in your plan, they become retired members effectively in this plan, even though they're still working for the city and contributing. Their pension is fixed at the time they either elect to join the drop or the reverse drop. You can see that the benefit payments for firefighters are just shy of $42,000 per year. Police officers just shy of $38,000 per year. We expect these numbers to go up a little bit every year due to the cost of living adjustments, as well as the fact that police officers and firefighters who are retiring today generally make a higher pension than the ones that retired 20, 30 years ago and have deceased and rolled off in 2019, 2020. So we'll expect these numbers to go up a little bit. You might ask yourself, the firefighters who are higher than the police officers, I think it all goes back to what Mr. Marvell said. Firefighters tend to have lower turnover, work longer with the city, and so they tend to have slightly higher pension.
And Steve, that's what my question would be. So, yeah, I was concerned more when I saw this, because this meant they actually made it all the way to retirement. So then they were putting that average in, and we're still $4,000 less than the firefighters, but we had actually reached retirement. So,
Yeah, but a GFR member is more likely to go to the full 25 years. You all have a lot of drop off at 20.
Going to 20.
And it's actually getting worse today than it was 5 years ago.
right.
Of people planning to leave at 20. I mean, you know it, you talk to your members. But even if you take a look at slices of historical data going forward, if you take a look at people who've retired from 2010 forward, that benefit is substantially higher than the $37,000 you're seeing there.
This is an average number also.
Of all
If everybody
people currently
currently
receiving
someone that
the
left 20
benefit.
years ago and
Right.
years ago and in 1 year.
Lakes with an average depth of 10 inches. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Even the folks who retired 20 years ago, with the cost of living adjustments, that generally helps with inflation and trying to keep them up, but it tends to lag behind what the current public safety officers get when they
So-
retire.
Joe, I have one question, and I know this is part of the raw data because I've seen it before. The years of service associated with the retirement benefit is captured somewhere, isn't it, in the data? Like the average years of service a member has prior to retiring? Because those are different for police and fire, that number, as I recall.
Yeah, firefighters tend to stay longer with the city than the police officers do when they retire.
Yeah.
I don't have that on favor.
And-
Steve, I know that data exists.
It's in the data.
Okay. Is it in the report?
Joe, I didn't see it. Is there a slide that shows, ranges of years of service or anything like that in the VAL, in the index or in the back of the VAL? I'm not sure if there is. I can provide that information to the board if you
Yeah,
need
there
it.
is. There is a chart that shows, and I'm talking about active members, that shows age and years of service, and you do split that out by police and fire also,
Within the
don't you,
next
Ms.
tab.
Val?
That's right.
Scroll
yeah.
all the way down.
That goes to show you how I spend my
Go
time
to like almost the end.
looking at the exhibits.
Okay, I think this one has the
Too far. Sorry.
kind of,
About 5
the head of
pages.
the information.
It's going to be a chart.
That's all the plan provisions that we have to report for the state. If you want to hear it, tell me, read this thing. Keep going, you're in section 10. Okay, so this is the police officers, this is the age service distribution. So you can see as of October 1, 2020, there are 243 police officers, and you can see the service bands and the age bands. So, this chart tends to go from the upper left to the bottom right, because as you age, police officers are hired, in their 20s and their early 30s, so you can see a lot with 0 to 4 years of service. And then I'm pointing at my screen, which does nothing for you. So there were 4 years of service, and then we grouped it in 5-year bands after that, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, so on and so forth. This is pretty typical disclosure in these reports. State required, you can see that we have no police officers currently as of October 1, 2020 that will pass 30 years of service. 5 that are 25 years of service that are about 50 years of age. If you look at the police, firefighters, which should be the next couple pages up.
Just a quick question, Steve, maybe you'll have that. So the 20 to 25 and then something to 35, it's a big number. Those are disabilities? How we would...
Those are active.
Those are active, that's how many years of service they currently
Oh,
have
okay.
with the city.
I saw past service.
It's how many, past service means how many years have they completed as of the vow date, right, Joe?
Okay,
That's right, yes.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
You got 5 people who have completed at least 25 years of service. If you look at the firefighters, you only have 1. That's in the 25 to 29 range. Probably, unfortunately, can get who that is because there's more in the 60s. But you probably know exactly who that is. But you can get a good sense of the demographics of each of the groups between fire and police by looking at these charts. And some of these charts are also helpful when you're in the city and you can kind of tell who's coming up on retirement and when you're going to need to start hiring in public safety officers as well.
And I think the data that would answer your questions or, show you a little more information would be for retirees, the years of service they had before they retired is what you're looking at.
Right.
And that is also in the data. I can, I have to kind of work with it, but I can pull that information out if you need it.
My only point on that is it's not always, you just can't look at something like averages and assume it's pay differential. There's more than one component to a service retirement calculation.
Right.
And you all know that.
Yeah, well, again, it's also an assumption and a belief if you look at like our unions would look at, the Benny Smiths, those that before the change in the retirement system, I believe that they're actually making a lot more than everybody else, which they are, but they weren't that wasn't the average. That was a small number. However, how many of those people were there?
Yeah, I'm more of a median believer than an average believer because of outliers. But that's not what the state requires, right?
Right.
We're a very average state.
Trying to get to the point where I'm able to explain it to them.
Yeah, well, it doesn't always give you the most accurate snapshot,
And
but
this
it
report,
allows you to pass.
this one is actually attached to.
It's the actual valuation. So, and I mean, if you want to discuss it, you can call us and we can walk through it anytime. If you have questions about the data or anything like that.
No,
So
so
the
I
data
can
there,
explain it to them.
I look at it, this is what's required under Florida statute to
Right, that's the
submit to the
difference.
state, which, it's a lot experience on me, this is a great report for these.
All right, Joe, is there anything else from this report we're going to present?
Yeah, I've got a few more slides, and you guys was asking really good questions, so I'll try to speed it along, so we don't lose Bob. Or maybe we have lost Bob, but, yeah, if you want to switch to the next slide. So just simply put, these is your market actual rates of return on your assets and other inputs evaluation, which you can see that the actual value is doing exactly what we want it to. You can see that, 7.3, 7.9, 9.2, 9.38, so on and so forth, light green bar. The whole purpose of the actual value is to smooth out asset volatility, which you see in the market value. And so this, all this chart is confirming that the actual value of assets is doing exactly what we want it to, which is to smooth out investment returns. So that way, Mr. Ramos and the folks budgeting don't see a lot of swings in their contribution requirements from year to year. If you want to go to the next slide. So here's the market value of assets of the fund as of each of the last 6 snapshot dates. This one being almost $300 million. Split between police and fire, $175.8 million, $121.2 million for firefighters. You'll see the jump from 18 to 19, we reflected the pension obligation bond proceeds as a receivable, as I mentioned earlier. So that's what reflects that jump in the assets. And if you scroll down to the next slide, William, you'll see the actuarial value has a similar picture. It's very close to the market value. It's a little bit higher for this year at $302.9 million. It's doing exactly what we want it to do. It's keeping a nice steady upward trend for the valuation purposes. Again, the 2019 reflects the pension obligation bond as a receivable, which is why you see that jump. Moving to the next slide. This just goes through the liability changes. We're expected to be about $302.8 million as of October 1, 2020. I mentioned that we changed the mortality table that actually reduced the liability by $4.1 million. We had very modest gains that also reduced the liability by $0.3 million. So our liability, our accrued liability as of October 1, 2020 is $298.4 million. And again, the whole purpose of the valuation is to fund it so we get to 100% over time. If you flip to the next slide, William, this just breaks down the gains and losses by each source. It takes the liabilities and it also adds the investment and contribution timing gains and losses. So at the end of the day, when we set up a new 30-year amortization base, we're setting up a $1.2 million gain for firefighters and a $1.5 million gain for police officers. Again, those numbers don't really matter at the end of the day because, as I said, you're over 100% funded, so you can't take into account those credits as offset to the city contribution. William, if you scroll to the next page, it shows your funded status. As of the snapshot date, I'm very pleased to present 101.7% for the fire, 101.4% for the police. In aggregate, you're at 101.5%. And so on an actual value basis, as you saw from earlier slides, the actual value of assets is a little higher. So on market value, you're really closer to 99.5%, which is, in my mind, basically 100. So this is a really good position to be in. I will advise, as I have in the past, the city, the board, the union, whomever, this is where we want to be. This is not the time to start thinking about benefit improvements. I would prefer to see your plan at 110, 120% before any of that discussion even starts, because as you know, markets can correct. We can see a 10% reduction in the market in any given year, and you want to have some
Cushion.
Some margin there. And so we're plans in cities and communities have gotten themselves past if they get 200 and they think, oh my goodness, let's spend money. This is not the time to do it. But I am so excited to, I know the pension obligation bond was a big contributor, but it's always very exciting to be actually, that's what gets me excited is when I see a plan over 100% funded. So, thank you for that. If you scroll down to the next slide, William, this just goes through the contribution requirements for the last 2 years. So these are the last couple of slides. But you'll see that your plan costs about $4.4 million. Normal cost, that's like the cost of liability increasing due to people earning more benefits this year. You do have some administrative And there's no amortization of unfunded because you're over 100% funded, so that $237,000 from the revised report goes away, and so your plan is a $5.2 million cost at about 20% of payroll. If you break that down between members, and state and city, you'll see that the members, as you know, the firefighters contribute 9%, the police officers contribute 7.5%. The reason is they negotiated different COLAs, or the firefighters have their COLAs, the police officers negotiated different COLA. So the aggregate is 8.12. The state contribution that can be used towards this is 1.1 million. Anything in excess of 1.1 million goes to share plans. And so the city contribution is about 1.9 million or 7.5%, 7.56% payroll. So you're in a really good position. If you continue to be over 100% funded, you'll always have to contribute normal costs and administrative expenses under state law.
Hey, Joe.
And so,
What was that now, that last thing you said? If you continue upward above 100%, there'll be a minimum, is that what you said?
yeah, so this reflects the minimum. You're over 100% funded, and so you cannot, back in the day, you could potentially take a
Right.
contribution holiday or credit.
Right.
And state law changed, I can't remember the year, Bob probably knows it off the top of his head, maybe 2013.
Right around 11 or?
I think it was 11, Joe.
2011? What is the minimum? I was just curious. I don't know if Bob's still on.
It's the normal cost contribution. You have to fund the value of the benefit earned in that year.
In the administrative
In the
expenses.
administrative expense.
So those top two
Expenses,
lines.
and what was the other part? The normal cost?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
That's the
the
top two
value of the
lines.
benefit earned in that year, correct, Joe?
That's exactly right.
So that's what was paid out in benefit plus administrative expenses?
No. It's the value of the year of service and benefit earned by the active members is the normal cost,
Okay.
all right?
Another way to say this, if this was a 401k plan, okay, or defined contribution plan, they would be putting 20% into the account, and then it would be broken down between the city contributing 7.56%, the members contributing 8.12%, and then of course we have the state contribution. Once you eliminate that unfunded liability payment, it looks a lot like a 401k type contribution because you don't have an unfunded liability payment. But
Right.
Steve's exactly right. It's the value of the benefit. So everybody is earning, a higher salary due to contract. Everybody earns another 2.5% multiplier in 2021. And so that is the value, the 4.4 million is the value of those benefits increasing year over year. And so that has to be funded under state law.
And so the employer makes up the difference between the state and the employee contribution? Correct. Is that what it is? Okay.
That's exactly right.
All right, perfect. I'm all set.
So, last two slides just break it down between police and fire. So you'll see the fire contribution, and they're 9%, the firefighters contribute 9%. So the city is contributing 5.73% of payroll. Again, this would be, if the city continue to contribute as a percent of payroll, I'll need to give Ms. Ramos and her team the actual dollar amount because they're accelerating it. And they're going to basically make the contribution October 1st, 2021 through this plan. So you actually have those monies to invest earlier than you used to have them through this plan. And then if you fast forward to the next slide, you'll see the police officers pay 7.5%, $1.1 million to the fund, and the city's expected contribution is 8.8%. Again, the firefighters and the police officers negotiated slightly different benefits. Generally, the difference is the cost of living adjustments, and that's why the contribution rates are different between the two groups. But that pretty much concludes. Again, I mentioned earlier the experience study will be coming to this board sometime in the coming months with the results of that study and recommendations, and those will be implemented in the October 1, 2021 evaluation.
All right, thank you.
That concludes the presentation. There is also a full report that goes to the state that Wayne provided by email last week. We will submit that on behalf of the board. We have 6 days to do so once you approve the report. And we'll do that, of course, in time and manner for you. I think at this point I'll answer questions. If there are no questions, I think the next step would be to make a motion.
Any questions?
If you ask the question, motion is in order to adopt the evaluation and the assumption.
Catch that?
So Bob was just saying, go ahead, he thinks the motion should be to adopt the valuation with all the changes in the assumptions.
Correct.
All right, is there any other questions? No? All right, is there a motion to adopt the evaluation and assumption changes as presented?
Yes, I move to,
I'll second.
is it adopt or accept the vow?
Approve.
Approve the vow and the associated assumptions included in the vow.
Sound good. There's a motion on the table, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Under discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right.
And then this letter will get forwarded.
Do we need a motion to approve the assumption study for 2021? It was an item of discussion, or are we going to bring that back to discuss?
It's going to come back
Okay.
as a
Very
report.
well.
And
Okay.
so, I think the board had already,
Okay,
actually
very
had
well.
already discussed that he was going to do it with the board. And so in the coming months, he'll bring a report back for review and approval.
Just want to make sure that was covered also.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Joe. You still on there?
You're welcome. I guess I need to take back what I said about Mr. Marvell since he made the motion.
Appreciate it. All right.
You don't have to take anything back, Joe. I always remember.
I've never been in a meeting with Mr. Marvell where he hasn't made me laugh, so thank you for that, Steve.
Is this the PERS grade?
Right.
Next one? Okay.
Yep.
All right, next on the agenda, fiscal year 20 financial statements and independent auditors report for the Gainesville Consolidated Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement Plan. We have a presentation from Purvis Gray. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Barbara Boyd.
Barbara
For the
Boyd?
record, Barbara Boyd.
Boyd,
Purvis Gray.
okay. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So I'm the partner in charge of the engagement. We've presented this to the City Commission and the Finance and Audit Committee meetings. This will be my third time presenting it, but I'll just briefly go over what the results of the audit were. Won't get too much into the numbers. It's past history now, but you all have looked at that plenty. So starting on page 1 is our independent auditor's report. It looks very similar to what you've seen in past years. The first page, it shows what we actually report on, the financial statements themselves of the consolidated plan, what management's responsibility is for the preparation of these financial statements, as well as for maintaining internal controls to ensure that their financial statements are accurate and complete. Our responsibilities for auditing this information, selecting what procedures we're gonna perform for testing. The most important paragraph is actually at the top of page 2, the opinion paragraph, and that tells you that the financial statements were presented, were fairly presented in all material respects. That's what we call an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we as auditors can provide. The emphasis of matter paragraph is not something that you normally see in an audit report, but in this case, it's just telling you that we don't, these are just the consolidated plan, and they're not the citywide financial statements. So this is a component of the citywide financial statements that we're auditing. And then we have some additional reports, so you've got your financial statements and note disclosures, and then some additional reports in the back, starting on page 19, or actually just one additional report, which is our independent auditor's report on internal controls and on compliance. So as part of any audit conducted in accordance with government auditing standards, we issue this report. We look at your internal control processes, in this case the city's internal control processes over the preparation of the financial statements and their financial reporting processes. And we don't necessarily issue an opinion on internal controls. We use it just to determine where we're going to focus our testing. But as part of that process, if we identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, we would include them here and report them to you. So in this report, we actually make reference to the citywide audit report because there were a couple of material weaknesses that were overall just over financial reporting closing process, as well as a bank reconciliation item. So there were two material weaknesses in that report that didn't directly impact your financial statements. We actually had no material adjustments to the consolidated plan, but because they are material weaknesses over just the whole financial process, we do reference them in this report. You do have one more letter, communication with those charged with governance, which would be you as a pension board for the consolidated plan. In it, we include any significant, it's probably the next
It's
report.
the next document or previous document. Previous document.
Yep. So if there were any changes in accounting policies or what the significant estimates that are included in your financial statements, or any issues that we had in dealing with management, all that is included in this letter. So there were no changes in accounting policies this year. The significant accounting estimates in your financial statements, the big one is the fair value of investments, of course. That's based on, there's a hierarchy of fair value, but mostly based on quoted market prices when those are available. Sometimes those aren't available, so there's a net asset value that's used as a practical expedient on some of those investments. The net pension liability is also a significant estimate. As Joe mentioned earlier, there's many assumptions that go into determining what the future value of this benefit will be. So the net pension liability isn't reported necessarily in your statements. It is disclosed in there and then reported on the citywide financial statements. We had as I mentioned before, no corrected or uncorrected misstatements on your financial statements. And while it says there are some difficulties encountered in performing the audit, that was just in determining or in receiving closed out information. There were no difficulties in dealing with your staff. Your staff were all great, as well as the finance team, Cynthia and her team. So, certainly appreciate all the work that they put in. Going through an audit is not an easy process. So,
We do this every year?
We do this every year.
I remember doing it last year.
Well, I did not present to you last year, so. So that's all I have.
Everything looks good.
Everything looks good.
All right. So we need a motion to approve it, and then we also end up submitting this to the state.
Okay, so we'll be
Thank you for the
approving
motion to order.
two motions? Or is it-
He
said a motion.
To
Oh.
approve.
So moved up.
All right, so there's a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 independent auditor's report. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Nice to meet you.
Next on the agenda, old business. Got nothing. New business. Does anyone have anything to bring in front of the board?
I have one thing quickly, and this is a request from the city commission and the city manager's office. Last year, the city commission, through the clerk's office, started requesting that all of the city's advisory boards and committees make a brief sort of annual report presentation to the city commission, just to review, what the board or committee's activities were in the prior year, and what their upcoming projects were, things of that nature. And so for the general pension plan, we have the Pension Review Committee, which is a citizen advisory committee, and they presented a report earlier this year to the city commission. And the commission and city manager have also requested that the Police and Fire Pension Board do a similar type presentation. And I think Bob has some comments about this, but generally I think what we would request is that one board member work with staff to do like a 5 or 6 page presentation, PowerPoint type presentation for submission at a future city commission meeting.
Good idea.
Bob, did you want to talk about it, or Steve?
Yeah, this is actually fairly common. We do this in a number of cities. I sent William 2 examples this morning. I just presented to the city of Hollywood for their police pension fund and for their fire pension fund. I know we do it in West Palm. I do it for the city of Miami. We do it in Fort Lauderdale. It depends on who gives the report. Some places I do it, some places administrator does it, other places a trustee, and we tend to recommend that it be one of the citizen appointees do the presentation. I think come out 4 or 5 slides saying here's what our investments look like for the year, here's our actuarial events of the year, and here's any projects I'm undertaking, such as an experience study or an investment policy statement review, etc. So I think it's part of being a good partner with the city, and I would certainly recommend that we honor the city's request.
And to that point, on the pension review committee, the chairman gave the presentation, but it's up to the board who you would want to give the presentation. I think Bob had mentioned that in some places one of the city appointees gives it, since they are appointed to the board by the city commission. But it's I don't know.
Oh, I thought he said the citizen.
Well,
that is essentially that is what Bob is saying. It's the representative form of government. Through our representative, Walt and I were appointed by the people.
Exactly.
Oh,
So
I think that's actually, one of us should do that. Probably Steve, you're probably better positioned to do it.
they hear a lot from me. Well, it isn't always a positive response. So, but we do good work here, and I think it's important that the commission understands that our focus is on protecting the members' earned benefit.
Yeah.
So
Walt or Harvey's not here. All in favor for Harvey?
Well, no, I think what he's saying, if Harvey was the board appointed. Yeah, I'd be glad
I would
to
tell
do it, so long as you're in.
my thought
There you go.
My thought is, I'm perfectly fine at being one of the member appointing members from my perspective. I have
Well, it
no
makes-
preference
I
to
agree.
who on the board does it. I'm fine with the chairman. I am neutral on that.
You'll probably do a lot better if they have
I mean,
very intricate questions.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
There probably will be
I
questions.
can give it back to them in layman's terms, but
I think the board's message should be that regardless of who put us here, we all have the same fiduciary responsibility to those members.
Yes.
And everything we do is to act in that interest of the members.
And if this is important work, it's a lot of money, a lot of lives depend upon the success of this, and don't meddle.
And I think this is a good learning tool because the component, commissioners may understand the economic impact of the city's contribution on the budget.
Right.
They may not appreciate the significant economic driver that the pension fund is local, and that it makes jobs and it returns money to the local economy, it pays taxes. And so it's a good learning experience for futures who may not appreciate the nuances of the work that you do. And to the extent that the public pays attention to what the city commission does, is a chance to further educate the public. So I don't think it really matters who does it. I just think that, whoever's most comfortable speaking in public for 5 to 10 minutes.
And for what it's worth, I would only state that just as far as the matters for public comment, other issues that would come up, I think it is honestly best for neither of us to be there, because other issues may come up for their public comments, fire assessment, police department. It's just a lot cleaner.
Yeah, I got a couple of things I want to talk to you about. While you're up there.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
We don't need a motion though, right? If we have volunteers?
Yeah, if you, I don't know that you need a motion. If you just instruct, if one member wants to work with staff to develop the presentation, I think what we would do is bring a draft presentation back to the board in August for you to look at and approve, and then we would then take that presentation to the commission at a future commission meeting.
Exactly. And I would be glad to do it.
Perfect. You guys want to work on it? And then we'll know when it is. I'd like to be present if they'll let us in.
It should come back here. I mean,
Right. No, I meant when we eventually do the presentation. Who knows if we'll be allowed in the room at that point?
Yeah, my hope is that as any board member that is available, come up there and be recognized too, and be there.
Bob's asking a question.
What was that, Bob?
Who's going to do a wall?
Yeah, I
Walt
get
and Steve and...
You'll also can look at those two that I sent this morning.
Right.
Yeah.
William, he can either print them for you or report them to you,
Right.
and see what that looked like in the city. So specifically with regard to the public safety component. So, like I said, I think this is probably, it's work to get ready, and I think the actual presentation is 10 minutes of that.
We might have the opportunity to teach them about their responsibilities as trustees of the larger of the two plans, so.
Well, that's right, yeah.
Because, I mean,
That's what this is,
that is not what they ran for office to do.
Well, but that's the message, I guess, that gets conveyed implicitly, is this is a big business. These are important things that we do, and these are big numbers. And that's why you got staff.
Is the general fund, is the commission, is the board?
Yes.
And they don't have any
They sit
independent?
separately as the board of trustees. They use a citizen advisory committee that
Right.
does a lot of what we do as trustees here and then makes recommendations, but it's ultimately those 7 who are the trustees of the plan.
Is Foster & Foster their advisor also?
Actuary, yes.
Actually,
They are, yeah. We have a different consultant, we have different investment managers, there's some crossover there. The Pension Review Committee really focuses on the investments, and they're supposed to be investment professionals, local investment professionals. The board actually approves disabilities and things like that, so they handle, things that aren't necessarily investment related.
Yeah.
And for instance, they would approve the actuarial valuation, so things like that. So certain requirements they take care of other than the investments. They approve investment changes with the recommendation from the Pension Review Committee.
All right. Any other discussion on that?
So I'll forward, some sample presentations and put together a draft as well for Walt and everyone to look at. And then in August, we'll bring it back to the board. And, if more than one board member wanted to come to the meeting, you certainly can, and however you want to do it. But, it's like Bob said, it's a 5 or 10 minute presentation, usually at most, at one of the commission meetings.
It's always the afternoon portion too.
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't know that it's even business, but on the Zoom feedback from those on Zoom, the voices are garbled. It's almost like my dearly beloved PBS when they do their amateur hour stuff with.
We'll speak
Somebody.
to broadcasting about the speakers in the room. I
don't
think
know
it
if
has
it's here.
more to do with the room speakers than the Zoom connection.
You think it's here?
I think it's the speakers in this room.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll work on that. There are a couple informational items, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
yeah, so, next on the agenda, the evaluation acceptance letters.
All right, I just, that's a formality, but I wanted the board to have those from the state. This is with respect to the, the whole dispute about the payroll growth rate assumptions for the 2016 through 2019 actuarial vals. And so they have, accepted those revised vals at the state and approved those vals, which is something they have to do every, well, they're supposed to do it every year. They tend to do it in 3 or 4 year lump approvals.
Oh, this is from the DMS.
Right.
So we need a motion to accept those?
No, it's just informational. There's, yeah. And
So
then
everything's been accepted. Yeah, 'cause one I clicked through, I thought it said they weren't accepted. I thought it looked recent, but then I saw that was an old letter.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
So everything's perfect.
Yep.
And what's the last one here?
You had requested at a previous meeting the contribution changes from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. And I think your question had to do with what the reduction was related to the pension obligation bond issue
They just showed.
and what the impact was. So I provided this to you. One thing I would point out is that if you look at the required fiscal year 21 dollar amount contributions for police and fire, those were the amounts that were actually made the first week of October 2020, okay, as a lump sum contribution, employer contribution from the city. The contribution percentage rates that we show are estimates based on a projected payroll that was done in the fiscal year 19 valuation. So we use those just as sort of guidelines for what we think, the percent of payroll contribution is going to be. What ended up happening was those payrolls were larger than expected, but that doesn't impact the contribution when you do a dollar amount. In the past, we were doing strictly a percentage of payroll amount. So if the payroll was larger, you actually ended up contributing more. And if the payroll was less than projected, then you would end up contributing a little bit less. And occasionally, we had to have discussions with the state and true up the contributions, because what the state looks at is the actual dollar amount contribution that's required in the val.
Okay.
And so we would have to explain differences there when we were doing percent of payroll. Now we don't really have to do that because we're putting in an actual dollar amount calculated by the actuary.
And the 6 and the 9, that's where we're getting the average of the 8 point.
Right, exactly.
666, huh? All right.
Joe, do you have a comment?
Yeah, can you go back to the state, the most recent state accepted letter? Did the actuaries comment on anything? No, okay. I was curious because in some of the state accepted letters we've been getting, they made a specific comment around the investment rate of return assumption, and they've done some analysis where they have suggested that rates will be much lower than what we were currently assuming. I don't know if that might have been in the prior one or if that I'm taking in general, but I
Isn't
recall that was one.
Isn't our assumed growth rate one of the reasons they wouldn't accept our payroll growth plan?
No.
Wasn't that part of it?
No, it's not related.
They didn't, okay.
No.
Not related, so they accepted the 16 reports in before, prior, but then they put in this analysis which doesn't quite match your investment policy, but they give you a range of 5.5% to 7% for the investment rate of return assumption as to be a more reasonable assumption. So part of our study that we're working on will be to look at that assumption, but I just wanted the board to be aware of what the division is thinking and why we're really going to take our time and make sure we analyze this in a way that we think is very justifiable. We thought we were going to payroll growth assumption. We saw how that went with this division. So we're going to be even more careful with the experience study will present, is going to present to the board, because we want to make sure that we continue to be state accepted. At the same time, we want to make sure that we are, we're supporting the board as they use of this fund and using reasonable assumptions. So I wanted you to be aware of that, that comment that the actuary made in their state acceptance letter.
Steve?
Hey, Joe, I kind of know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask. So, FRS is, which has a less equity-based investment policy, they're somewhere between 5.5% and 7% is their earnings assumption right now?
So they've been trending down. I don't know if Bob knows the exact number offhand, but I thought
The
that they
answer to
were
that is
similar.
no. It is not.
Oh, Bob?
And they also use a payroll growth assumption within the Florida retirement system that is not necessarily reflective of their 10-year average on payroll growth. So
Actually, FRS does not follow the statute.
yeah, thanks, Bob. That's just
Their 10-year payroll growth assumption ain't nowhere near the one they use. So this is kind of one of those do as I say, not as I do. So, I rely on the reasonableness of Joe and the Foster team, and just argue with them that there's an interlake. They are.
Is it worth $1 million?
Continuing to argue with everybody over, assumed rates of return. Last year's focus seemed to be on payroll growth assumptions. Statewide, I'm seeing letters that are more focused on investment returns. But, and what I think is important is when you all identified this morning is that one assumption rate is not fit all. There are certainly closed plans, for example, that have to worry about preservation of capital because they still have large UALs, but no new players coming in. So they tend to have much lower rates of return. Whereas open plans that are growing and that are well funded, like yours, tend to have higher rates of investment return. And the managers and the consultants are spooked by the volatility of the market, so they're going to pitch on the low side no matter what, because that seems to be a safer place for their predictions to be. I think you have to look at, I think the focus on your mix, like 6% of fixed income is really low when you're in other funds. So unless you don't think there's a reason to change something, I don't. You'll notice that they took a snapshot here when the board was moving money from one manager to another. The house actually had 9% cash equivalents in the 5.5% to 7% range. So if you just put that 9% in whatever manager they put it in, that's going to bump it up above that range and go up. So it's not a great analysis to take to begin with. Well, I think if you notice, they take a recommend to consider it, but I think it's good. So,
Okay, yes.
I don't think this requires a response. Their letter does make them feel good. But I think it will be important at some point, either on minutes or in one of the investment summaries, to note the difference of expectations when you have a 73% equity and 9% cash, like you said. That's obviously you sold something or haven't bought something else yet.
Right. That was a transition between managers, so we were sitting on cash at that point in time, but that really would all be allocated to equities.
Right, and I think they went and searched for that.
Yeah.
So if your equities are returning 8%, and that's where 80% or so of your assets are, then that should be 80% of whatever that's returning on the factor that says your assumed rate of return.
Well, I have a question actually for Joe, I suppose it's more of a discussion item, but the last sentence in the second to the last paragraph, we recommend the board consider lowering the plan's investment return assumption, as I think we've alluded to. We did that and we decided not to, but I mean, a plain English reading of this letter, if it's being forwarded to the state now, would allow someone to say, hey, you're not accepting I didn't see any action to lower the board's, to lower the investment return assumption. And I'm wondering if that's, in fact, should it be included, A, or should it be reworded, B?
So, I think one, we're doing an experience study.
Yeah, well, yeah, we know that.
So,
Uh,
Joe, can I ask a question? Because you and Bob see these letters more broadly than we do. We see ours. When I see we recommend, that to me is foreshadowing of a kind of like, you will.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Is that typically
What the
what
public
you
thinks.
see over time?
Yes, when they recommend, well, on this issue, I haven't seen them say to anybody, you must. But this issue about investment return assumptions has been almost anybody's letter who's going to 7.5. And, in fact, I think it's been everybody's letter who's going to 7.5 without regard to their performance. And I think they tend to look at what FRS is using as an assumption rate, which I think now is 7, I'm going to say, for the state worth investment that they're using. So I think that's what's guiding their thinking. As long as your performance is good, I think you're fine. I would rather react to them than try to second guess what they might do. I just think that's better. I'm always of the opinion that forgiveness is a good.
Would it not be better,
That certainly wasn't my problem.
if there was a movement to lower it, would it not be better to obviously do when times are good? Would be less impact to the employer, the city?
As you know.
Like if we stay above 100, if the sky doesn't fall, which sure
It
it's
has the
gonna.
same impact to the city regardless, because if you reduce the assumption rate, the city makes up the difference. So, I mean.
Right, but if
It-
they're
it has-
already having to contribute less because we're
Right,
below
right,
1,
right,
right? I mean,
sure.
I'm just saying that it's less, you can't do it when the market's in the dumps.
So,
Right.
No, I think. the
Can't afford it.
question to do if I understand it, I think the time to do it, because I've only had, we did this in Anchorage when they were 120% funding.
How much?
120.
Oh, okay, yeah,
You're at 101
right.
right now. So, the time to do it is when you're up. So as long as you get some growth and you continue.
I mean, I think the city wants to realize some of the bond expenses and
So-
whatever, so.
here are my thoughts.
Because remember, the minute you lower your assumed rate of return, you set the pattern for the next, whatever the end of your
Right.
So,
planning period is there. You're going to now say, well, we're less well funded because we're not going to make as much.
Yeah.
And we lower our guaranteed drop rate.
So it's certainly, there's nothing wrong with asking Joe to give some scenarios of what, reductions in the assumed rate of return that I probably do it.
How often can you change it?
Planning purposes.
Change it every year.
Change it every year, and the board approves it, or the city approves?
The board
board
approves it,
sets
but,
the
you
actuarial
know,
assumptions.
you have to realize you're forcing an expense on the city when you do that.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
And,
So,
I mean, me personally, I want to see how this year shakes out, you know.
my thoughts on when you do it when you really believe there is a long-term difference in those future returns. I mean, historical is one thing, but this is a forward-looking assumption. Regardless of where the fund is valued, I think using funding status in and of itself as a health of the plan is terrible. For me, you look at the cost of the plan, and is the cost of the plan reasonable for the people we ask to fund it, which is the members and the public. And I suspect when you guys get all that data from the division, you will see that not just is it well funded, but it is also a reasonable cost to the members and the public. I think there's two components. What does it cost to maintain the plan? And the relative health related to the liability. You can see very well-funded plans that have over 50% combined contribution rates. Okay? So the contribution of the cost of the plan to me is as much a indicator of a responsible benefit from the provider's perspective as the funding status. Funding status is a single day benchmark. It is how did it look on 9/30/2000 That's it. But still, you do it when it's when you believe that the long term. And I would also say if a board ever looks at that, they should also look at whether they want to deleverage the risk associated with such a high equity component.
Right.
I mean, that's why
Well,
FRS is down. They have a much different investment mix within the SBA than our plan's policy. And I'm not saying we do that, William, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that if you were going to go to a 5.5, you should deleverage some of your risk within the equity markets.
And you have to, I think everyone has a different determination of what their risk level is. But to me, the normal way that investment consultants look at risk doesn't make a lot of sense to me. People argue against a high equity allocation in pension plans, or I don't see why you wouldn't have 100% equity, to be honest. Because over the long term, that's where you're going to get your highest returns. People argue that it's risky. But they're measuring risk with volatility. So consultants and investment managers, they don't like to see wide swings in returns from year to year, which is, their measure of volatility. I don't care how much the market moves if at the end of 100 years I've annualized at 10 or 11% as opposed to 7 or 8%. I'll take as much volatility as I have to get that 3 or 4% extra return over 100 years. That's what equities give you. Now, everyone's got a different opinion about that.
What does that do to the next valuation? If you're down 10% more than you would have been because you're all equity.
Well, actuarial smoothing, the 5-year smoothing, helps with that. It does have an impact, but you've got a 5-year smoothing period that and typically, if you see the market down 20% one year, most often it's up 20% the next year.
All right, I agree.
They're called buying opportunities, and in fact, I tagged, we reference somebody made to LSV, I guess it was down. They made the same note of that, and I thought, geez, that doesn't make sense. So I put a bunch of money personally into it, and I was very happy I did. But that's just an observation, and not everybody would want to do that.
Right. And
I'd like to look at it down the road. I want to see how the market plays out, because we're going to have a drop at some point, hopefully not too long. And I think 7.5 sounds safer for long term, but I haven't done all the research.
And we do look at it every year when we do the BAL. I work with Joe, and we get, every consultant firm out there and every investment firm out there has their projected, market return assumptions that they create. And so we look at a number of those when Joe puts together the BAL. And Joe, you can comment on that if you like.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to. So part of the experience study, we're going to look at all the assumptions, demographic and economic, and we're going to put an analysis together for on the investment rate of return and make a recommendation. The assumptions that William's talking about that the investment consultants publish tend to be 10 to 20 year seen boards like yours, moving in a direction of upward, mostly downwards, but some have stayed where they're at. So we'll just see how that analysis plays out. I will remind this board that he did an analysis probably 6 or 7 years ago on this assumption with your current consultant, and that's how we ended up at 7.9%. We were at 8.5%, and we decided, or the board decided. I like to say we because I like to think myself as part of the board, but I'm really not. But the board decided to down the assumption from 8.5 to 7.9 over a period of 6 years at 10 basis points per year. So we'll look at that again as part of this experience study, and the board can decide what they would like to do as a result of that analysis. But I just want to kind of remind those that maybe weren't on the board 6 or 7 years ago how we ended up going from even 8.5.
Yeah, I remember, spoke to our predecessors about it. I remember when we were at 8.5, we were at 9 before that, right?
When I started, I believe we were at 10.
And I agree. The frustrating part is that, so we get a letter, they have their assumption, we recommend 7. And just as, Foster has said, well, that's really what they're wanting us to, they won't say mandate, but they will. So if an issue does come up, at least we had the, if we go down to 7, we can say, well, we did what you recommended for us to do.
I don't see us getting 7 anytime soon.
But I also don't see us,
7.5, but we'll still get the hate mail though. They'll still gawk at 7.5, but at least it's.
we still get hate mail.
They want you to lower it so
Right.
you'll overfund the plan more quickly.
But
That's
Let's hope so.
And that is the name of the game. I remember, and you guys, some of you will, buying a home mortgage at 13.5%.
I remember my dad doing it, yeah.
15%.
18, I think, at one point, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Almost
so I
15.
mean, it's not like this is, we're in a steady stream, because it's ups and it's downs.
Yeah.
But, the frustrating part is that we agreed that we would fight the state on their recommendation. We didn't go through with it. We settled. We went out and got a bond in order to cover all the things that the state, although we feel that we are in a good position, they armbarred us and said, we're going to withhold your money. We're just going to keep withholding, and we're not even going to court. We're not even going to arbitration. We're just...
Well, we could have, and we started that process, and, I would say that we didn't issue the bonds to resolve that issue. We issued the bonds to create the arbitrage because we could issue at less than 3% and earn between 8 and 10%. And so from the city's point of view, that made sense.
That's the corollary.
You're lowering the cost.
But if we were making 10 and then we took 3 out of that, that's still 3% that we could have been making on our own if we had just continued on the way we were going. We took out a bond because the discussion was that, well, typically it averages 10%. Well, we're only going to pay 3% for this bond. To me, that means we only made 7% though, because 3% of what we had made has to go back into pay for the bond.
You still made 10 on the money that wasn't paying for the bond.
Right.
So there's still.
Right.
So there's a cost to it.
And the pension doesn't pay the bonds, the city issues them, the city pays for it. So the calculation is, well, the city could continue making contributions to the pension that are discounted at the assumed rate of return of 7.9%, give or take, or you can issue bonds at less than 3% and take that out. And so your savings to the city and to the citizens would, you'll see what it is over time. You can't say exactly what it is until you're done with the bond. But if you use just the assumed rate of return, it's going to be close to 4%. You're saving on those contributions of 50 million or so that you put into the plan all at once.
I would still go with Clauser and continue with the lawsuit, just teach them a lesson, because all we are is a bullseye for them.
Right.
I mean, we seem, it's us and another department in the state of Florida.
Well, the state definitely doesn't get along with the city of Gainesville that well.
Correct.
But, for us, continuing, I agree on principle. It would have been nice to have seen the outcome, but realize you're arguing that the administrative hearing process is done through the Department of Management Services,
Right.
which is the same department that oversees the Division of Retirement. So it's basically the same department that you're trying to argue against through the administrative hearing process.
And all they have to say is don't take the money, right? The $1 million? We don't have to.
Well, yeah, but it held, there were members, you know, the 185 funds, everything.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Strong on this.
Sure.
I mean,
But we don't have to take that
And the
money.
thing is, it didn't cost the city anything to settle. You know, that was what the bond issue,
$200,000.
although it wasn't intended to have that, it didn't, the bonds weren't issued for that purpose, but they had that effect. So we accepted it, and we ended that dispute. At some point, I think, if the state comes back and says that they're going to require us to lower our assumed rate of return, well, that's when we have a more serious discussion with them. But it doesn't hurt to be proactive and look at it, and that's one of the reasons we do the experience study, to see if we think we can still keep a 7.9,
And that's your argument, right?
or whether it makes sense to go to 7.5, or something like that.
Okay.
All right, interesting discussion. I had a fight with these guys when I was a young city manager back in the 80s. Sometime, I guess it was, and I forgot who it was up there. But his name I should never have forgotten. But I had to do with fire pensions, as a matter of fact. And because we were in the FRS at that time. And it was absolutely no-win situation. No win at all. And it seemed illogical to me, but everybody said, hey, look, just get along and go on.
Just get through.
We did, and I learned.
All right, any other discussion?
Just the only other thing that I would say is informational is some text that I included in the agenda that you have there if you want it. It has to do with the requirements, the state
Right,
requirements for
okay,
public
so-
meetings.
For the record, yeah, we discussed it with,
That's because at the last meeting, we had a citizen get up and say that, you know, we had not met the requirements by not publishing attachments prior to the meeting. And that's not a requirement, and I got the city attorney's response to that, and Bob looked at it and agreed. So I just wanted the board to be aware that we have been meeting all state public meeting requirements. We've not ever not met those. But going forward, we will be attaching the documents electronically to the online agendas through the city's website, and also recording all the meetings and posting those recordings to the website. So,
Just as you do in our emails.
right.
so dress nicer.
Okay. Well,
I'm just kidding.
I'm
joking.
You don't have to. And the last item was about a question that Steve had when the board elected him secretary.
Yeah.
He asked why we didn't have a vice chair. And the Florida statute language requires the board to elect a chairman and a secretary, but it doesn't speak to electing a vice chair.
I thought that's kind of what it was.
I don't know if Bob has an opinion about whether that's something the board could do. I assume the board can do that if they choose to, but we just never have. We've always just followed statute language requirements.
As you may have learned, I have an opinion about everything. Yes, it's entirely permissive for you to decide as a matter of internal policy you want to have vice chair. I don't think it's a bad idea, just so that there is a time when the chair is unable to attend, you at least have somebody who can call the balls and strikes and motions and other things out of it. So I think it's a good idea. And I think just what you want to do as a matter of practice is when you elect the chair and the secretary, we'll just have vice chair.
So what we might do is put an agenda item on the August meeting for discussion about this, and if, hopefully we'll have the full board here, and if you want to, someone wants to nominate someone and you decide you want a vice chair, then we could have the election at that meeting.
And that would be possibly the slash secretary also, which is what we called the chair? Or do we want to do?
Well, however the board wants to do it. I mean, you could say that I guess you could make a motion that the secretary will serve as vice chair in the absence of the chair. You
Which
could
I
make
thought
it
is
like
what
that.
I thought that's kind of how it was anyways.
Do that as well.
Right. Perfect.
So it's entirely within your discretion.
Okay.
Chairman, I have another meeting starting.
I have a quick question.
Probably more today than I have the last 2 years.
Can I have
Only a break from me, so my maybe is,
I got a real quick question.
yes, sir.
To be on this board per the state statute, do you have to be an active police officer?
Good question.
If you're on the board, here's the example. You're on the board, however, during your 2-year term, you're going to retire.
When you are elected, you must be active. If you retire during your term, you may complete your term, but you can't run for reelection.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Unless it's a real small membership, right?
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Florida is what's called a holdover jurisdiction. The Constitution requires and states that public officers shall hold office until their successors are appointed. Only the office of governor and lieutenant governor actually have a time when their authority ends. For municipal officers like pension trustees, you would hold over until the successor is selected. So, yes, you would be able to continue to return.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
All right, it's good to see everybody.
All right.
Hopefully in person soon.
Be safe.
Bye.
And by the way, I will not be in town on the 25th, so I'll have to do a Zoom attendance.
Okay. Harvey, you still with us? I forgot he was here. Okay. All right, no public comment? Hearing none, seeing none? We've already discussed about everything, I think. Next meeting date, August 25th, same place, 9 a.m.?
Yes.
Walt, we'll see you on Zoom,
Yes.
and possibly Harvey, unless he can make it. We'll discuss the vice, chair, secretary, and everything else. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You're right. We'll be done.
Thank you.
Thank you.